I never thought I'd be grateful for betrayal. But the day I found my husband's credit card statement with a $6,000 charge for a diamond pendant, one I'd never received, became the first day of my real life. David hadn't even bothered hiding. The receipt, which listed Sophia Winters as the shipping recipient. 22 years of marriage, and he couldn't muster the decency to create a separate email account for his affair. The pendant cost more than he'd spent on my birthday and anniversary. Gifts combined for the past 5 years. That night, I didn't confront him. Instead, I transferred half of our joint savings, $217,000 to be exact, into my personal account. Money that had been earmarked for our future. A future that apparently no longer included me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 45, I'd spent over 2 decades building what I thought was a perfect life with David Morgan. We lived in a beautiful craftsman home in Lakeside, just outside Portland. David worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown, while I'd put my culinary dreams on hold to raise our son, Ethan, who was now away at college. I managed the household, hosted his business dinners, and showed up at every company event with the perfect smile. I'd been the dutiful corporate wife, the backbone that allowed his career to flourish. That diamond pendant receipt arrived 3 days before our anniversary. That morning, I'd been preparing David's favorite breakfast, sourdough French toast with homemade blackberry compote. The berries had stained my fingers purple as I stirred the mixture, humming to myself, planning the perfect anniversary dinner menu in my head. I'd been naive enough to believe we were happy. "Hey, the Henderson file came in," David said, kissing me quickly on the cheek as he grabbed his coffee. "I'll be working late tonight. Don't wait up." His cologne smelled different, spicier, younger. Somehow, it wasn't the one I'd given him for Christmas. "But we have dinner reservations at Riverside," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's our anniversary week." David didn't even look up from his phone. "Damn, that's right. Can we reschedule? This client is worth 7 figures, Ellie." I nodded silently, watching him grab his keys. The Henderson file, the late nights, the subtle changes in his appearance, new clothes, a different haircut, hitting the gym at odd hours. All those little moments I'd dismissed came rushing back, with painful clarity. After he left, I sat at our kitchen island, the breakfast growing cold. 22 years of marriage, and he couldn't even remember our anniversary was coming up. That's when I decided to organize his desk, something I did periodically to help him stay on top of things. That's when I found it. The credit card statement, with a $6,000 charge from Cartier. The gift receipt was still stapled to it, with Sophia Winters' name and an address I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I placed the statement back exactly where I'd found it. Then, almost mechanically, I walked to my laptop and logged into our joint account. The balance stared back at me, $434,217.86. Money we'd been saving for retirement, for traveling the world someday. Someday when the time was right, someday when David wasn't so busy, someday that, I suddenly realized, would never come, at least not for us together. I transferred exactly half, not a penny more, not a penny less. Then I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by the herb garden I'd cultivated in small pots along the windowsill, and thought about what I really wanted. Since college, I'd dreamed of opening a small artisanal food company. My grandmother had taught me how to preserve fruits and vegetables from her garden, adding unique combinations of herbs and spices that made her preserves legendary among family and friends. I'd created my own recipes over the years, giving jars away as gifts during holidays. Everyone always said, "Ellie, you should sell these." But David had never taken the idea seriously. "Cute hobby, Elle," he'd say, patting my hand. "But it's not a real business plan." That night, When David came home smelling of unfamiliar perfume, I greeted him with a smile and his favorite dinner. I asked about his day and listened attentively as he talked about the Henderson account. Not once did I mention the pendant or Sophia Winters. "You seem different tonight," David said, studying me over his wine glass. "Did something happen today?" I smiled, meeting his gaze directly. "Just thinking about the future." He nodded, clearly relieved I wasn't asking about his late night. "We should discuss that Vanguard account again. I've been thinking we might want to restructure how we're allocating the savings." I replied noncommittally. "Yes, we should definitely talk about that." For the next 2 weeks, I maintained the charade. I smiled, cooked, cleaned, and played the role of the devoted wife while secretly meeting with a lawyer, viewing potential retail spaces, and researching small business loans. I called my old culinary school friend, Grace Chen, who now owned a successful restaurant in Portland. "I need your advice," I told her over coffee at her restaurant before opening hours. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the elegant space she'd built from nothing after her own divorce. Grace listened without interruption as I explained everything: the affair, the money, my plans. "He's been sleeping with his assistant for at least 6 months, I concluded. "But I don't want to confront him yet. Not until I have everything in place." Grace nodded, her expression both compassionate and fierce. "You're doing the right thing, Ellie." I watched. "You put your dreams on hold for decades. It's your turn now." I'd found a small Victorian building downtown that had previously housed a boutique clothing store. The rent was reasonable, and it had a commercial kitchen in the back that needed updating but was workable. I signed a 6-month lease using my personal savings, money I'd squirreled away from selling preserves at the local farmers market over the years. David had never asked about that account, never showed any interest in my little hobby. On our actual anniversary, a date, David had completely forgotten. I received a text message that wasn't meant for me. I was in the kitchen when his phone pinged on the counter. Normally, I would never look, but the preview notification caught my eye. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Got something special planned for." My fingers moved before I could. "Stop them." I picked up his phone and opened the message. Sophia Winters. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Got something special planned for your anniversary. The pendant looks perfect on me. Just like you said it would. You deserve something special after putting up with her for so long." There it was. Confirmation in black and white with a photo attached of a young woman, beautiful, blonde, no older than 27, wearing my anniversary gift. I set the phone down exactly as it had been and returned to chopping vegetables for a dinner David wouldn't be home to eat. The knife moved rhythmically against the cutting board, each precise cut helping me focus my thoughts. The pain was there, sharp and real, but alongside it grew something else: determination. That evening, I drove to the Victorian building I'd leased. It was empty except for some basic supplies I'd brought over earlier in the week. Standing in the dusty space, I could envision what it would become. Shelves lined with colorful jars, a tasting area where customers could sample unique flavor combinations, a small cafe section serving seasonal dishes featuring my preserves. I made my first batch of preserves in that kitchen that night. Wild blackberry with lavender and honey, my grandmother's recipe with my own twist. As I stirred the bubbling mixture, watching it thicken and transform, I felt something inside me changing too. With each jar I filled and sealed, a piece of my old life fell away. At midnight, I received a text from David. "Working late. Don't. Wait up." I smiled to myself, alone in my new kitchen, surrounded by the sweet aroma of blackberries and possibility. "Don't worry," I whispered to the empty room. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I won't. The next morning, I woke early and made breakfast as usual. David came down looking tired but satisfied with himself. He kissed my cheek absently. "You came in late," I said, sliding a plate of eggs in front of him. "Henderson account," he replied automatically. "But it's wrapped up now. Actually, I was thinking we could take a weekend trip soon, maybe to Cannon Beach. We haven't done that in years." I nodded, wondering if he was planning to bring Sophia there afterward, or if this was a genuine attempt to reconnect. Either way, it didn't matter now. "That sounds nice," I said, pouring him coffee. "Hey, I was thinking about that business idea." Again, my preserves. David didn't even look up from his phone. "Ellie, we've talked about this. It's a cute hobby, but let's be realistic. The startup costs alone would wipe out our savings, and for what? To sell jam?" "Not just jam," I said softly. "Artisanal preserves, chutneys, specialty foods." He sighed impatiently. "Same difference. Look, I know you're bored now that Ethan's at college, but maybe volunteer somewhere, or take some classes? The risk isn't worth it. And honestly, I don't think you understand what running a real business entails." I nodded, absorbing his condescension like I had so many times before. But this time, I saw it clearly for what it was: fear of my independence. For decades, he'd treated my dreams as cute, childish fancies, while his career always took priority. Even now, as he was betraying me with a younger woman, he couldn't resist belittling my ambitions. "You're probably right," I said, giving him the acquiescence he expected. "I'll think about those classes." David smiled, pleased with himself. "That's my girl. Hey, I forgot to mention, I moved some money around in our accounts for that investment. Opportunity I told you about. You might notice some changes in the balance." My heart skipped a beat. Had he discovered my transfer? But his casual tone and relaxed posture told me he hadn't checked the accounts yet. He was preemptively explaining away the missing money he likely planned to use for Sophia. "I trust you with our finances," I said, which wasn't a lie. I had trusted him, completely, until the Cartier receipt changed everything. After he left for work, I called the contractor I'd hired to renovate the commercial kitchen in my new space. "We can start tomorrow," I told him. Full steam ahead. For the next week, I lived a double life. By day, I was still David's wife, maintaining our home while secretly building my business. By night, I worked in my new space, developing recipes, designing labels, creating a business plan, and setting up social media accounts. I chose the name Heritage Provisions, a tribute to my grandmother and the legacy she'd passed down to me. Grace introduced me to Marcus Patterson, a retired business executive who now mentored small business owners. He reviewed my business plan, offered valuable suggestions, and even introduced me to local retailers who might be interested in carrying my products. "You've got something special here, Eleanor," Marcus told me, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he sampled my figs and rosemary preserve. "Your passion comes through in every bite." I worked tirelessly, fueled by a mixture of pain and excitement. The pain of betrayal was still raw, but it was increasingly overshadowed by the thrill of creating something that was entirely mine. Each jar I produced represented not just food, but freedom. Exactly 10 days after I discovered the pendant receipt, David finally noticed the money transfer. I was in the garden, harvesting herbs for a new batch of savory tomato jam, when he stormed outside, face flushed with anger. "What the hell happened to our savings account?" he demanded, waving his phone in my face. "Where's the money, Ellie?" I straightened up slowly, brushing soil from my hands. The fresh scent of rosemary filled the air between us. "I took my half," I said simply. David's expression shifted from anger to confusion. "Your half? What are you talking about?" "That's our retirement fund." "Yes," I agreed. "For our future." "But we don't have a future anymore, do we, David? Not since you started sleeping with Sophia Winters." The color drained from his face. I don't know what you're... Please, I interrupted, surprising both of us with my calm tone. Don't insult me by lying. I saw the Cartier receipt. I saw the text messages. I know about the pendant you bought her with our money. $6,000 that should have gone toward our future, not hanging around your girlfriend's neck. He stood frozen, mouth opening and closing like a fish. It would have been almost comical if it weren't so painful. You had no right to take that money, he finally managed, his voice rising. That's theft. I laughed then, a genuine laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside. No, David. I had every right. I contributed to that account for 22 years. I supported your career, raised our son, maintained our home, and put my dreams on hold. Half is actually quite generous, considering Oregon is a community property state. What are you going to do with it? He demanded. You can't just... I already am, I said, cutting him off. I'm starting my business, the one you always called a cute hobby. I've leased a space downtown, and I'm opening in 6 weeks. His laugh was ugly, dismissive. You're going to fail. You don't know the first thing about running a business. I met his gaze steadily. Maybe I will fail, but it will be my failure, on my terms. And that's worth more than another 20 years, as your backup plan. The garden suddenly seemed very quiet. Even the birds had stopped singing, as if holding their breath to see what would happen next. It's not what you think with Sophia, David said finally, his voice softer now, cajoling. It was just a stupid mistake. We can fix this, Ellie. We have history, a life together. Had, I corrected gently. We had a life together. Now I'm building my own. Something shifted in his eyes then. A realization that he couldn't charm or bully his way out of this situation. His face hardened. Fine, he snapped. Have your little midlife crisis, but don't come crying to me when you're bankrupt in 6 months. He stormed back into the house, leaving me alone among my herbs. I should have felt devastated, but instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation I dreaded was over, and I was still standing. I looked down at my soil-stained hands, the hands that had cooked thousands of meals for David, had meticulously kept his home, had caressed him during intimacy. They were strong hands, capable hands, and now they were going to build something, just for me. I took a deep breath of the garden air and smiled. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. That night, David didn't come home. I sat alone at our dining table, eating the dinner I'd prepared by candlelight, savoring each bite with a newfound appreciation. The grandfather clock, in the hallway, a wedding gift from David's parents, chimed 9 times, its resonant tones filling the empty house. Before the confrontation, I might have worried, might have called his office or friends. Now I simply poured myself another glass of wine and enjoyed the silence. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. How did it go? It's done, I replied. He knows everything. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared before her response came through. You okay? I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? The marriage I'd invested half my life in had just imploded. The man I'd built my world around had betrayed me in the most cliched way possible. By all accounts, I should be devastated. Actually, yes, I typed back. I feel free. The following morning, I woke to the sound of David stumbling into the bedroom at dawn. He reeked of whiskey and perfume, his clothes rumpled as if he'd slept in them. Or hadn't slept at all. We need to talk, he slurred, sitting heavily on the edge of the bed. I sat up, pulling the covers around me. You're drunk, David. Get some sleep. We can talk later. He shook his head stubbornly. No, we need to fix this now. I've been thinking all night. I'll break it off with Sophia. We can go to counseling. You can even start your little jam thing as a hobby, and I'll support it. See? I'm compromising." The condescension in his voice made something harden inside me. Even now, faced with the consequences of his actions, he couldn't take me seriously. "That's not a compromise, David. That's you attempting damage control while still treating me like a child." His bloodshot eyes narrowed. "What do you want, then? To throw away 22 years over one mistake?" "It wasn't just one mistake," I said quietly. "It was thousands of little choices you made every day to dismiss me, to take me for granted, to put yourself first. The affair is just the final symptom of a disease that's been growing for years." David's face darkened. "So that's it? You're leaving me? Over some midlife crisis business venture that's going to fail within the year?" I slid out of bed and reached for my robe. "I'm not leaving you, David. I'm finding myself. What you do with that information is up to you." I walked to the bathroom and closed the door, ignoring his continued protests. Under the hot shower spray, I let myself cry. Not for the marriage I was losing, but for all the years I'd spent dimming my light to make him shine brighter. When I emerged, David was passed out across the bed, still fully clothed. I dressed quietly and left for my new business space, where I had a meeting scheduled with the contractor. The Victorian building looked different in the clear morning light, more real somehow, as if it had been waiting for me all these years. The contractor, a barrel-chested man named Ray with kind eyes and calloused hands, was already there, measuring the kitchen space. "Morning, Mrs. Morgan," he greeted me. "I've been looking at the setup here. The plumbing's good, but the electrical will need updating to handle commercial equipment. And that back wall, we might want to take it out, open the kitchen to the retail space a bit. Let customers see the magic happening." I found myself smiling at his enthusiasm. I like that idea. I want people to see the process, to feel connected to where their food comes from. We spent the next hour walking through the space, discussing renovations and timelines. Ray seemed to genuinely understand my vision, offering suggestions that enhanced rather than altered my ideas. By the time we finished, I had a clearer picture of what Heritage Provisions would become. "We can start demolition on Monday," Ray said as we wrapped up. "Should take about 4 weeks for the full renovation, barring any surprises hiding in these old walls." 4 weeks. In just 1 month, my dream would begin taking physical shape. The thought both exhilarated and terrified me. As I was leaving, my phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, sending a jolt of anxiety through me. Our son was in his junior year at UCLA, absorbed in his studies and college life. We typically spoke once a week on Sundays. A Thursday morning call was unusual. "Ethan? Is everything okay?" I answered, trying to keep the worry from my voice. "Mom." His voice sounded strained. "Dad just called me. He's not making any sense. Something about you emptying the accounts and starting a business. He said you're having some kind of breakdown." I closed my eyes, leaning against the Victorian's exterior wall. Of course David would call Ethan, trying to recruit our son to his side. "I'm not having a breakdown, honey," I said calmly. "But your father and I are going through some changes. I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Can I call you tonight when I'm home?" "He said you took half the retirement money." Ethan persisted. "Is that true?" I sighed. "Yes, I took my half of our joint savings. There's more to the story, Ethan." "Like what?" "Dad says you've lost your mind, that you're throwing away everything to sell jam or something." The dismissiveness in his voice, so like his father's, stung more than I'd expected. "Your father has been having an affair," I said quietly, "for at least 6 months, with his assistant." The silence on the other end stretched for so long, I wondered if we'd been disconnected. That can't be right," Ethan finally said, his voice smaller now. "Dad wouldn't do that." "I wish that were true," I replied. But I have proof. Concrete proof. Another long pause. So you're getting divorced? His voice cracked slightly on the last word. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. What I do know is that I'm making changes in my life. Starting the business I've always dreamed of is part of that. But Mom, a food business? Do you know how hard that is? How many new businesses fail? There it was again. That dismissive tone, that certainty that I couldn't possibly succeed. Like father, like son. I might fail, I acknowledged, but I'd rather try and fail than spend another 20 years wondering, what if? Ethan didn't respond immediately. I could practically hear him processing, weighing his father's version against mine. I need to go, he finally said. I have class in 20 minutes, but I'll call this weekend, okay? I'd like that, I said softly. I love you, Ethan. Yeah. Love you too, Mom. The call ended, leaving me feeling hollowed out. I'd known this would be difficult for him. Children of any age struggle when their parents' relationship changes. But I hadn't anticipated how much his doubt would hurt. In his eyes, I was still just Mom, the background character in the family story, not someone capable of building something significant. That evening, I returned home to find David waiting in the kitchen. He'd showered and changed, and the dining table was set with takeout from my favorite restaurant, a peace offering. We need to talk, he said, his voice carefully modulated, rationally, like adults. I set down my bag and took a seat across from him. I'm listening. David leaned forward, hands clasped on the table. I spoke with a financial advisor today. A colleague, not me, obviously. The money you took. Ellie, it's a significant portion of our retirement savings. If you burn through that on a business that fails, we'll never recover financially. Both our futures are at stake. Your concern is touching, I replied, keeping my voice level. Especially considering you spent $6,000 of our money on jewelry for your girlfriend. He flinched visibly. That was a mistake. A terrible, inexcusable mistake. But it was 6,000, not 200,000. The scale is different. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, the 6,000 was just the latest in a long pattern of you putting your wants above our needs. The affair is just the most obvious symptom. David's composed facade cracked slightly. Don't psychoanalyze me. Ellie, you're not qualified. And you're not qualified to determine whether my business will succeed or fail, I countered. You've never even taken it seriously enough to look at my plans or projections. Fine, he snapped, pushing back from the table. You want me to take it seriously? Show me. Show me the business plan, the financial projections, the market analysis. Convince me this isn't just some emotional reaction to our marital problems. I studied him for a moment, noting the calculation behind his eyes. This wasn't genuine interest. It was a strategy to regain control. No, I said simply. David blinked, clearly not expecting that response. No? No. I don't need to convince you of anything. I don't need your approval or permission. What I'm doing isn't a reaction to our marriage failing. Our marriage is failing because you never respected me enough to believe I could do something like this. And proving myself to you now would just reinforce that dynamic. His expression hardened. So that's it? You're just going to risk everything we've built? I'm going to build something new, I corrected him. Something that's mine. What you do, whether you stay, whether you go, that's your decision. But my business is happening regardless. David stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You've changed, he said accusingly. I nodded. Yes, I have. After he stormed out, I sat alone at the table, the untouched takeout growing, cold. The confrontation had left me drained but resolute. For decades, I'd measured my worth through David's eyes, seeking his approval, his validation. Breaking that habit would be the hardest part of this journey. The next morning, I arrived at my Victorian to find the front door slightly ajar. Alarmed, I approached cautiously, pushing it open with one hand while keeping my phone ready in the other. The sight that greeted me stole my breath away. Someone had broken in during the night and ransacked the space. The few supplies I'd brought in were scattered across the floor, some smashed beyond repair. My recipe notebook, containing generations of family recipes plus my own creations, was gone. Most disturbing of all, someone had spray painted across the main wall. Hobby business. My hands shook as I called the police. While waiting for them to arrive, I phoned Ray the contractor. "I'll be there in 15, he said grimly after I explained what had happened. The police arrived first, a young female officer named Jennings and her older male partner, Detective Walsh. They took photographs, dusted for fingerprints, and asked me about anyone who might have a grudge against me or my business. "My husband," I said quietly. "We're going through some difficulties. He doesn't support this business venture." Officer Jennings looked up from her notepad. "And you believe he might be responsible for this vandalism?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But the phrase on the wall, hobby business, that's what he always called my idea." His exact words. Detective Walsh exchanged a glance with his partner. "We'll talk to him. Get his whereabouts last night. In the meantime, you might want to consider installing security cameras. This is a relatively isolated location after hours." After they left, Ray arrived, taking in the damage with a low whistle. "Someone really didn't want you to succeed," he observed, examining the smashed jars and equipment. I nodded numbly, still processing the violation. This wasn't just an attack on my property. It was an attack on my dream, my heritage, my sense of self. "We can fix this," Ray said firmly, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "In fact, if you're willing to adjust the renovation schedule, we could install security measures first, then proceed with the rest. I know a good company. My brother-in-law runs it." I looked around at the destruction, feeling a strange calm settle over me. If someone, whether David or anyone else, thought this would stop me, they were sorely mistaken. If anything, it only strengthened my resolve. "Let's do it," I agreed. "And can we accelerate the timeline for the rest? I want to open sooner." Ray raised an eyebrow. "We can try, but rushing construction usually means—" "I know it'll cost more," I interrupted. "I'm willing to pay the premium. I need this place up and running as quickly as possible." Later that day, after meeting with Ray's brother-in-law about security systems, I sat in my car, finally allowing myself a moment to break down. The loss of my recipe notebook hit me hardest. It contained not just recipes, but memories, notes, in my grandmother's handwriting, adaptations I'd developed over years. It was irreplaceable. I called Grace, my voice thick with unshed tears. "Someone broke into the shop last night. They trashed everything and stole my recipe book." Grace's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Oh, Ellie. Was it David?" "I don't know for sure," I admitted. "But who else would know to take that book specifically? Who else would know how much it meant to me?" "That absolute bastard," Grace hissed. "Have you confronted him?" I leaned my head against the steering wheel. "Not yet. The police are going to question him first. I can't believe he would go this far." "People get ugly during divorces," Grace said softly. "I've been there, remember? They lash out at whatever they think will hurt you most." After hanging up, I drove home, hoping David wouldn't be there. I needed space to think, to plan my next steps. But his car was in the driveway, and as soon as I entered, I could tell something was wrong. The house was too quiet, too still. I found him in the study, surrounded by open boxes. He was methodically going through our photo albums, separating pictures into piles. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. He didn't look up. "Dividing assets? Isn't that what happens in a divorce?" The word hung in the air between us. Neither of us had actually said divorce until now. "Is that what you want?" I asked quietly. David finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "You made your choice, Ellie. You chose your business over our marriage." "That's not what happened, and you know it," I replied. "You chose Sophia over our marriage long before I decided to start Heritage Provisions." He flinched at the name. "I broke things off with Sophia." "When? After I confronted you, or after I took the money?" His silence was answer enough. "Were you at my shop last night?" I asked directly. David's head snapped up. "What?" "Someone broke in, vandalized the place, stole my grandmother's recipe book, spray-painted hobby business on the wall. Sound familiar?" His face paled. "You think I would do that? Destroy property? Commit a crime?" "I don't know what you're capable of anymore," I said honestly. "The husband I thought I knew wouldn't have carried on a 6-month affair with his assistant either." David stood abruptly. "I was at the Capitol Grill until midnight with clients, then at the Marriott downtown. They'll confirm it. And for the record, I didn't take your damn cookbook." I studied his face carefully. Either he was telling the truth, or he was a better liar than I'd given him credit for. "If it wasn't you, then who?" I asked. David shrugged, turning back to the photo albums. "Maybe someone who knows a bad investment when they see one." The casual cruelty of his words struck me like a physical blow. Even now, he couldn't resist belittling my dream. "The police will be contacting you to confirm your alibi," I said, turning to leave. "Ellie?" he called after me, his voice suddenly hesitant. "I really didn't do it. But I'm not surprised someone tried to stop you. This business, it's not you. You're not a businesswoman. You're going to get hurt when it fails." I paused in the doorway, not turning around. "You know what hurts more than failure, David? Never trying at all." That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in the guest bedroom, my mind racing with questions. If David didn't vandalize my shop, who did? Who else would have known about the business, about the significance of that recipe book, about David's hobby business dismissal? At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make tea. As I waited for the kettle to boil, I scrolled through social media on my phone, more out of habit than interest. And that's when I saw it. A post from Sophia Winters, time-stamped the night before. A selfie in front of a familiar Victorian building, captioned, "Taking out the trash." No competition. The photo had been deleted, but someone had taken a screenshot that was now circulating among the local business community's private group. Someone who apparently knew both of us had tagged me in the comments. "Isn't this your new place, Ellie Morgan?" My hands trembled as I set down the phone. So it was Sophia, not David. Somehow that felt worse. The idea that this woman I'd never met, who'd already taken my husband, now felt entitled to destroy my future too. I forwarded the screenshot to Detective Walsh with a brief message explaining who Sophia was. Then I called Grace despite the hour. "I know who vandalized the shop," I told her when she answered groggily. It was her, Sophia. Grace was instantly alert. "David's assistant? Are you sure?" She posted a selfie outside my building last night, called it "taking out the trash." The post is deleted now, but someone screenshot it. That vindictive little... Grace cut herself off. "This is good, though. Evidence, proof, you can file charges." "I will," I assured her. "But that's not going to get my recipe book back." We were silent for a moment, both understanding what that book represented. Not just recipes, but a connection to my past, to the women in my family who had passed down their knowledge through generations. "You know," Grace said slowly, "you might not have the physical book anymore, but those recipes are still inside you. You've been making them for years. Your hands remember, even if your mind doesn't recall every detail. Her words sparked something in me, a realization that while the book itself was irreplaceable, the knowledge it contained wasn't lost. I had been watching my grandmother since I was tall enough to reach the counter. I had made those preserves hundreds of times. The recipes were part of me now. "You're right," I said, feeling a new sense of determination. "And maybe some of them need updating anyway. A fresh start." After hanging up, I grabbed a notebook and started writing, trying to recreate my grandmother's recipes from memory. With each recipe I recalled, my confidence grew. By dawn, I had reconstructed nearly a dozen core recipes, with notes on variations and modern twists I could add. I called Ray as soon as it was a reasonable hour. "How quickly can we get the kitchen operational?" I asked without preamble. "With the security system? Maybe 3 weeks for basic functionality," he replied. "Why?" "I need to start production as soon as possible," I explained. "There's been a change of plans. Instead of waiting for the full renovation, I want to get cooking as soon as the kitchen meets code. We can finish the retail space later." Ray was quiet for a moment. "That's doable. Not ideal, but doable." "You sure about this?" "Absolutely," I said firmly. "Someone tried to stop me by taking my recipes. I'm going to show them that didn't work." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. As Ray and his crew worked to make the kitchen functional, I focused on recreating my recipes, developing new ones, and building a brand identity for Heritage Provisions. Marcus, my business mentor, introduced me to a talented graphic designer who created labels that captured exactly the combination of tradition and innovation I was aiming for. David and I established an uneasy truce, living like polite strangers in the same house. He'd filed for divorce the day after I'd confronted him about the vandalism, presenting me with papers through his lawyer. I'd signed them without protest, relieved in a way to have the process formalized. The police had questioned Sophia about the break-in, but without concrete evidence beyond the deleted social media post, they couldn't charge her. My recipe book never resurfaced. I tried not to dwell on its loss, focusing instead on the future. 23 days after the break-in, Ray called me with the news I'd been waiting for. "Kitchen's ready. We've got the permits and everything's up to code. You can start production whenever you want." The next morning, I arrived at Heritage. Provisions before dawn, arms laden with fresh berries, herbs from my garden, and new jars waiting to be filled. I stood in the renovated kitchen, my kitchen, and felt a profound sense of rightness wash over me. This space, these tools, this work, it was what I was meant to do. I tied on my apron, washed my hands, and began the familiar process of preparing fruit for preserving. As I worked, memories of my grandmother flooded back, her patient hands guiding mine, her soft voice explaining why we added lemon to brighten flavors, how to test for the perfect set. The rhythm of chopping, stirring, tasting grounded me in the present while connecting me to my past. By midday, the kitchen was filled with the intoxicating aroma of simmering berries and herbs. I had just finished labeling my first batch of jars, wild blackberry with lavender and honey, when there was a knock at the back door. Grace stood there, holding a bouquet of fresh herbs and a bottle of champagne. "First day of production deserves a celebration," she announced, stepping inside. She surveyed the gleaming jars cooling on racks and nodded approvingly. "They're beautiful, Ellie." I carefully packed 6 jars into a gift basket. "The first batch of Heritage Provisions preserves," I said, presenting it to her. "I couldn't have done this without your support." Grace accepted the basket with a smile that quickly faltered as she looked past me. I turned to see what had caught her attention. A tall man in an expensive suit stood in the doorway connecting the kitchen to what would eventually be the retail space. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. He seemed out of place in my new world. Then realization dawned. "David," I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" He stepped into the kitchen, looking around with an unreadable expression. "I heard today was your first production day. I thought I should see it." Grace stiffened beside me. "I should go. Call me later," she murmured, squeezing my arm before slipping past David and out the front door. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, the air between us heavy with unspoken words. "So," David finally said, gesturing to the rows of cooling jars. "This is it, your business." "Yes," I replied simply. "This is Heritage Provisions." He moved closer, examining one of the jars. "Blackberry Lavender Honey Preserve," he read from the label. "Your grandmother's recipe?" I nodded, with my own twist on it. David picked up the jar, turning it in his hands. "The labels are good, professional." "Thank you," I said cautiously, unsure where this conversation was heading. He set the jar down carefully. "Our divorce will be finalized next month," he said abruptly. "The house is being listed next week. My lawyer said you agreed to the terms." "I did," I confirmed. "The division is fair." David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. "I didn't trash your shop," he said quietly, "or take your recipe book. I need you to know that." "I know," I replied. "It was Sophia. There was evidence." He flinched at the name. "She's not in my life anymore, not personally or professionally. I fired her after I found out what she did." I raised an eyebrow. "That's surprisingly ethical of you." "Don't sound so shocked," he said with a bitter laugh. "I may be a cheating bastard, but I draw the line at criminal vandalism." We fell silent again, the gulf between us seeming both vast and insignificant in this new context. "Why are you really here, David?" I finally asked. He looked around the kitchen once more, his gaze lingering on the copper pots, the gleaming countertops, the neat rows of cooling preserves. "I guess I wanted to see if it was real," he admitted. "If you were really doing this." "And now that you've seen it?" David met my eyes directly for the first time. "Now I think maybe I was wrong. About this being just a hobby. About you not being capable of running a business." The admission, grudging as it was, struck me speechless. In 22 years of marriage, I couldn't recall David ever acknowledging he was wrong about anything significant. "That doesn't change anything between us," I said when I found my voice again. "I know," he replied. "Too much has happened, but I wanted you to know. I'm not rooting for you to fail anymore." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving me standing alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the fruits of my labor, literal and figurative. I picked up one of the jars, still warm from processing. The rich burgundy color of the preserves caught the afternoon light, gleaming like a jewel. This small jar represented so much: my heritage, my present struggle, my future, possibilities. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. I still had to find a new place to live once the house sold. I had to complete the shop renovations, build a customer base, establish relationships with retailers. The business might still fail, as David and Ethan had predicted. But standing in that kitchen, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. The quiet certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them on my own terms. I unscrewed the jar and dipped in a clean spoon, tasting my creation. The flavors burst on my tongue: sweet blackberries, floral lavender, rich honey, complex, balanced, and distinctly mine. This, I thought, is what freedom tastes like. The real estate agent's heels clicked against the hardwood floors as she guided potential buyers through what had been my home for over 2 decades. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to be busy with meal preparation while strangers opened closets and commented on the potential of various spaces. Each time someone remarked on the dated kitchen or needs updating, I gripped the counter a little tighter, reminding myself that this house wouldn't be mine much longer anyway. "Excellent bones," the agent chirped, leading the young couple back toward the foyer. "The owners are motivated sellers, so there's definitely room to negotiate." After they left, I sat at the island, surrounded by the silence that had become my constant companion. In the week since David moved out, taking only his personal belongings and leaving me to sort through the accumulated detritus of our shared life, the house had grown increasingly hollow. Rooms that once buzzed with family life now echoed with emptiness. My phone pinged with a text from Marcus. "Meeting set with Portland Food Co-op. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. They're interested in carrying your line." A smile broke through my melancholy. The co-op was exactly the type of retailer I'd hoped would stock heritage provisions. Local, community-focused, with customers who appreciated artisanal products and the stories behind them. If this meeting went well, it would be my first major wholesale account. I texted back a quick thank you, then checked the time. If I hurried, I could spend a few hours at the shop before heading to Grace's for dinner. Ever since production began, I'd settled into a rhythm. Mornings for administrative tasks, afternoons for cooking, evenings for planning and development. The work was demanding but exhilarating, each day bringing new challenges and small victories. When I arrived at Heritage Provisions, I found an envelope taped to the front door. Inside was a handwritten note from Ray. "Thought you might want this back." Beneath it lay a familiar leather-bound notebook, worn at the edges, stained with decades of cooking splashes. My recipe book. I clutched it to my chest, tears springing to my eyes. How? Where? I flipped it open, confirming it was indeed my grandmother's handwriting filling the early pages, my mother's neat script in the middle section, my own increasingly confident notes toward the end. I pulled out my phone and called Ray immediately. "Where did you find this?" I asked the moment he answered. "You like that, huh?" I could hear the smile in his voice. "Found it in a dumpster behind the building next door. Must have gotten tossed when they cleaned up after the vandalism. Spotted the corner sticking out yesterday when I was doing a final inspection on your security system." Relief and gratitude flooded through me. "Ray, I can't even begin to tell you what this means to me. This book, it's irreplaceable. It's my history." "Figured as much from how upset you were when it went missing," he replied. "Anyway, just wanted to let you know the security system's all set. Full coverage, inside and out. Nobody's gonna mess with your shop again without getting caught on camera." After thanking him profusely, I sat at my small desk in the back office, carefully examining the recovered notebook. It was slightly water damaged, some pages stuck together, but most of the content remained intact. The tangible connection to my grandmother, restored when I least expected it, felt like a sign that I was on the right path. With renewed energy, I spent the afternoon preparing for the co-op meeting, selecting sample products and rehearsing my pitch. By the time I drove to Grace's house that evening, I felt more centered than I had in weeks. Grace lived in a converted warehouse loft downtown, the industrial chic space reflecting her bold personality. The moment I walked in, the aroma of something rich and garlicky enveloped me. "Perfect timing," she called from the kitchen area. "I just opened the wine." I settled on one of her bar stools, accepting a glass of Pinot Noir. "You're not going to believe what happened today. Ray found my recipe book." Grace spun around, wooden spoon in hand. "No way! Where?" "In a dumpster near the shop. It's a bit damaged, but still usable. I can't tell you how relieved I am." "That's fantastic," she beamed, turning back to stir whatever was simmering on the stove. "See? The universe is telling you this business is meant to be. I sipped my wine, allowing myself to absorb her optimism. I hope the co-op agrees tomorrow. If they take on my products, it could be a real turning point. Grace ladled her creation, a fragrant mushroom risotto, into bowls and joined me at the counter. They will. Your preserves are exceptional, Ellie. Anyone with taste buds can see that. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Grace set down her fork and fixed me with a serious look. So, I have news. Big news, actually. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. My stomach tightened. In my experience, big news rarely preceded something positive. What is it? I've been approached about opening a second Grace's in Seattle, she said, her eyes bright with excitement. It's a prime location, investors lined up, creative control guaranteed. Grace, that's wonderful, I exclaimed, genuinely happy for my friend's success. Her first restaurant had become one of Portland's most beloved dining destinations, and expansion had always been part of her long-term vision. There's more, she continued, reaching across the counter to take my hand. I want you to come with me as my business partner. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. Partner? In the Seattle restaurant? Grace nodded eagerly. Hear me out. Your preserves would be featured ingredients in signature dishes. We'd dedicate retail space to selling Heritage Provisions products. You'd have input on menu development, focusing on dishes that showcase your creations. It's the perfect synergy. My established brand opens doors, while your products add a unique dimension that sets us apart in a new market. My mind raced, trying to process this unexpected proposition. A partnership with Grace would indeed provide instant credibility and exposure for Heritage Provisions. The financial stability would be welcome after months of uncertainty. What? About my shop here? I asked. I've invested so much already, emotionally and financially. Keep it as production headquarters, Grace suggested. We'd need a steady supply for the restaurant anyway. You could split your time between Portland and Seattle, at least initially. And if Heritage Provisions takes off the way I think it will, you could eventually hire someone to manage day-to-day operations here. It was a tempting vision, a clear path forward with reduced risk, backed by Grace's proven business acumen. Yet something held me back from immediately accepting. You don't seem thrilled, Grace observed, studying my expression. What am I missing? I chose my words carefully, not wanting to seem ungrateful. It's an incredible offer, Grace. Truly. I started this business to prove I could stand on my own, create something that's entirely mine. Becoming part of Grace's even as a partner feels like a detour from that goal. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Ah, I didn't think of it that way. This isn't just about business for you. It's about independence. Exactly, I nodded, relieved she understood. After depending on David for so long, defining myself through his needs and his career, I need to know I can succeed or fail on my own terms. Grace refilled our wine glasses, contemplative. I get that. But consider this. True independence isn't about doing everything alone. It's about making choices that serve your goals, including smart partnerships that help you grow faster. Her words resonated more than I wanted to admit. Was I clinging to an idealized vision of solo entrepreneurship at the expense of practical growth opportunities? Think about it, Grace urged. No pressure, no deadline. The offer stands whenever you're ready. In the meantime, knock 'em dead at the co-op tomorrow. I promised to consider it seriously, and we spent the rest of the evening discussing lighter topics, the latest restaurant gossip, a film Grace had recently seen, my ongoing search for a new place to live once the house sold. By the time I drove home, my mind was buzzing with possibilities. The next morning, I woke early, too nervous about the upcoming co-op meeting to sleep. I channeled my nervous energy into baking, filling the kitchen with the comforting aroma of cinnamon and apples. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, I heard the familiar chime of my email. Most messages these days were business-related: supplier confirmations, renovation updates, marketing inquiries. But this one made my heart skip. Ethan's name in the sender field, with the subject line, "Coming Home." I clicked it open immediately. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. Dad's version, your version, the truth that probably lies somewhere in between. I've decided to come home next weekend to see for myself what's going on. I want to visit your shop, if that's okay. Maybe I've been too quick to dismiss what you're building. Also, I have some news of my own to share. Nothing bad, just life changes. See you Friday. Love you, Ethan." Tears pricked my eyes as I read and reread the message. My son was coming home, not to take sides, but to understand. It was more than I'd dared hope for. With renewed determination, I prepared for the co-op meeting, selecting jars of my 4 best-selling preserves: the blackberry lavender honey that had become my signature, a spiced apple butter perfect for fall, a bright citrus marmalade with hints of rosemary, and a savory tomato jam that paired beautifully with cheese plates. I dressed carefully in what I'd come to think of as my business owner outfit: a structured blazer over a simple blouse, dark jeans, and low boots that were both professional and practical for a day that would involve both meetings and kitchen work. As I applied a touch of lipstick, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Confident, focused, with a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. The Portland Food Co-op occupied a renovated industrial building in the trendy Pearl district. As I approached the entrance, sample case in hand, I spotted Marcus waiting near the door, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. Perfect timing. He greeted me with a warm handshake. "Donna's expecting us. She's the head buyer and a personal friend, so this should be more conversation than formal pitch." Marcus's presence instantly calmed my nerves. In the months since we'd begun working together, he'd become more than a mentor. He was a steadfast advocate for heritage provisions, opening doors I didn't even know existed. Donna Wright turned out to be a formidable woman in her 60s with cropped gray hair and keen eyes that missed nothing. She welcomed us into a small conference room, where I arranged my samples on the table. "Marcus speaks very highly of your products," she began, examining the jars with interest. "He says they're transformative. Strong word from a man who doesn't give praise lightly." I smiled, grateful for Marcus's endorsement. Their recipes passed down through generations of women in my family, with my own contemporary twist. Everything is made in small batches, using local ingredients whenever possible. Donna nodded approvingly. "Local sourcing is important to our customers. They want to know the story behind what they buy." "Each jar has a story," I agreed. "The blackberry lavender honey preserve, for instance. The blackberries come from a family farm in Willamette Valley that's been operating for over a century. The lavender is from my own garden, planted from cuttings my grandmother gave me years ago." As I spoke, I arranged crackers on a small plate and opened the jars for tasting. Donna sampled each flavor methodically, making notes as she went. Her expression remained neutral, giving no indication of her thoughts. "The savory tomato jam is interesting," she finally commented. "Not many producers doing that well. Most are too sweet or too acidic." "It's all about balance," I explained. "I use heirloom tomatoes at peak ripeness, then add just enough brown sugar to enhance their natural sweetness, balanced with a careful blend of spices." Donna tried another sample, this time pairing the tomato jam with a slice of sharp cheddar she produced from a small refrigerator in the corner. She closed her eyes briefly as she tasted, then looked at me with new respect. "This is exceptional," she said simply. "How's your production capacity? If we stock these, they'll move quickly." The question caught me slightly off guard. I'd been so focused on perfecting my products and securing retail opportunities that I hadn't fully planned for rapid scaling. "Currently, I'm producing about 50 cases weekly," I answered honestly. But I've designed the kitchen for expansion. With advance notice, I could increase that significantly. Donna and Marcus exchanged a glance I couldn't quite interpret. We typically start new vendors with a small order, maybe 10 cases across different varieties, Donna explained. But occasionally, when we find something truly special, we go bigger. I'd like to do a feature display for Heritage Provisions. 30 cases to start, prominent placement, social media promotion. How quickly could you deliver that? My heart raced. 30 cases, 360 jars, was my largest order to date by far. Yet I knew better than to seem overwhelmed by the opportunity. 2 weeks, I said with more confidence than I felt. Sooner if you need it for a specific event. Donna's smile widened. 2 weeks works perfectly. Our fall harvest showcase begins the following weekend. Your preserves would be an ideal addition. By the time we left the co-op, contract in hand, I felt like I was floating. Marcus insisted on celebrating with coffee at a nearby cafe, where he revealed another piece of news. There's something else you should know, he said once we were seated. Donna isn't just any buyer. She sits on the selection committee for the Northwest Artisanal Food Awards. Her enthusiasm for your products could open even more doors. I nearly choked on my latte. The NAFA? Those are the most prestigious food awards in the region. Marcus nodded. Nominations for this year close next month. Based on Donna's reaction today, I'd say Heritage Provisions has a real shot. A NAFA nomination, let alone a win, would put you on the culinary map nationally. As I drove back to my shop later that afternoon, my mind whirled with possibilities. The co-op contract alone would generate steady income and visibility. If Heritage Provisions received NAFA recognition on top of that, the trajectory of my business could change overnight. Yet with opportunity came new pressure. 30 cases. In 2 weeks meant long days and sleepless nights. I'd need help, more than just sporadic assistance from Grace when she could spare time from her restaurant. I pulled into the small lot behind Heritage Provisions, noting with satisfaction that Ray's crew had installed the security lights we'd discussed. As I unlocked the back door, mentally calculating how many batches I'd need to produce daily to fulfill the co-op order, I noticed a figure sitting on the steps leading to the kitchen entrance. My hand froze on the doorknob as recognition dawned. Ethan? My son stood, his tall frame unfolding awkwardly as he offered a hesitant smile. Hey, Mom. Your email said you were coming next weekend, I managed, still processing his unexpected presence. Ethan shoved his hands into his pockets, a gesture so like his father it made my heart twist. Yeah, I decided not to wait. Can I come and see what you've been building? I nodded, unlocking the door with suddenly trembling hands. Ethan followed me inside, his gaze sweeping over the renovated kitchen with undisguised curiosity. Wow, he said softly. This is professional. Like actually serious. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or be offended. What were you expecting? A hot plate and some mason jars? He had the grace to look embarrassed. Kind of, yeah. Dad made it sound like you were having some sort of crisis, playing at being a businesswoman. To get back at him. The familiar hurt flared, but I pushed it aside. And you believed him. I didn't know what to believe, Ethan admitted, running a finger along the gleaming stainless steel countertop. You were always just Mom. Making dinner, keeping the house perfect, showing up at my games. I never thought of you as someone with business ambitions. His words stung with their unintended truth. For years, I'd subsumed my identity so completely in motherhood and wifehood that even my own son couldn't see beyond those roles. I didn't either for a long time, I said quietly. But people change, Ethan. Or maybe they just remember who they were always meant to be. He nodded slowly, then gestured at the rows of preserves cooling on racks. Are those the famous Heritage Provisions products I've been hearing about? I smiled, recognizing his attempt to lighten the mood. Just finished those this morning. That batch is headed to the Portland Food Co-op next week, my first major wholesale account. No kidding? The co-op's a big deal. There was new respect in his voice as he examined one of the jars. So this is Grandma's recipe? The blackberry one you used to make for Christmas gifts? With my own twist, I confirmed. Try it. Grabbed a clean spoon and opened the jar, watching as he tasted the preserve with the thoughtful consideration of someone who'd grown up around good food. It's amazing, he declared, eyes widening. Better than I remember, actually. There's something different. The lavender? Good palate, I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. I've been experimenting with different herb infusions. The lavender adds complexity without overwhelming the blackberry. For the next hour, I showed Ethan around the shop, explaining my vision for the retail space, the story behind Heritage Provisions, and my plans for growing the business. He asked surprisingly astute questions about pricing strategy, production, capacity, and distribution channels. You know a lot about business for a pre-med student, I observed as we sat at the small table in my office, sharing a pot of tea. Ethan hesitated, fiddling with his mug. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. I'm not pre-med anymore. Since when? I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral. Since last semester, he admitted. I switched to business with a focus on sustainable food systems. I didn't tell you because I thought you and Dad would be disappointed. I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. Ethan, I could never be disappointed in you for following your passion. Is this what makes you happy? He nodded, relief washing over his features. I love it, Mom. The intersection of food, sustainability, and business. It's exactly where I want to be. But Dad was so set on me becoming a doctor. Your father doesn't get a vote on your future, I said firmly. Neither do I, for that matter. This is your life. Ethan studied me with new eyes. You've really changed, you know that? 6 months ago, you would have backed whatever Dad thought was best. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. I guess we're both finding our own paths now. A comfortable silence settled between us, broken only when Ethan said hesitantly, So, I had this idea on the drive up here. It's probably crazy, but what if I stayed for the summer, helped you with Heritage Provisions? It would be perfect. Experience for my degree, and you clearly need the extra hands with this co-op order. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. My son, whom I'd barely spoken to since the separation, was offering to spend his summer working alongside me in the business David had dismissed as doomed to fail. What about your internship at the hospital? I asked, recalling his summer plans. Canceled when I switched majors, he shrugged. I was planning to find something food-related anyway. This would be ideal. Hands-on experience with a startup. Artisanal food company. Plus, he added with a grin, employee housing is covered until the house sells, right? The unexpected gift of Ethan's support, practical, emotional, and symbolic, threatened to overwhelm me. I blinked rapidly, determined not to cry. I'd need to work you pretty hard, I warned, covering my emotion with a brisk tone. The co-op wants 30 cases in 2 weeks, and I'm developing new products for fall. Bring it on, he challenged. I'm a quick learner, and I already know the basic recipes from watching you all these years. That night, I couldn't sleep. The day's events kept replaying in my mind. The successful co-op meeting, Ethan's unexpected arrival, and even more unexpected offer to help with the business. The possibility of a NAFA nomination hovering on the horizon. After months of struggle and doubt, it felt as though the universe was finally aligning in my favor. I slipped out of bed and padded downstairs to the kitchen, where my grandmother's recipe book now sat safely on the counter. As I leafed through its familiar pages by the dim light over the stove, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. On one path lay Grace's partnership offer, a safe route with built-in support and guaranteed exposure for heritage provisions. On the other path was the independent road I'd started down, now potentially enhanced by Ethan's summer help and the co-op's endorsement. The safer choice versus the more challenging but potentially more rewarding one. It mirrored the choice I'd faced 23 years ago when I'd set aside my culinary ambitions to support David's career and raise our son. I closed the recipe book and made myself a cup of chamomile tea, carrying it outside to the garden I'd spent years cultivating. In the moonlight, the herb beds looked silvery and mysterious, the air heavy with the scent of rosemary and mint. My phone buzzed with a text. I expected Grace, who often suffered from late-night inspiration, but instead saw Marcus's name. Spoke with Thomas Rivera after our meeting today. He's interested in discussing investment opportunities for heritage provisions. Major potential. Call me in the morning. Thomas Rivera, the venture capitalist who had backed some of the most successful artisanal food brands in the Northwest. Marcus had mentioned him in passing, but I never imagined he'd take an interest in my fledgling company so soon. Investment capital could change everything, allowing me to expand production, hire staff, accelerate growth. But it would also mean sharing control, justifying decisions to investors, potentially compromising the artisanal quality that made heritage provisions special. As I sipped my tea beneath the stars, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in my adult life, I faced a future shaped entirely by my own choices, not by the needs and expectations of others. The possibilities before me, Grace's partnership, Rivera's potential investment, the independent path with Ethan's temporary help, were all viable options, each with its own advantages and trade-offs. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. There was no single right answer, no perfect path forward. There was only the next step, chosen with intention and integrity. I thought of David, who had texted earlier to inform me he'd be picking up the last of his things while I was at the co-op meeting. Our paths had diverged irrevocably, yet I felt no bitterness now, only a gentle sadness for what might have been if we'd both been different people. My tea finished, I returned inside and curled up on the sofa, listening to the quiet creaks and sighs of the house I'd soon leave behind. Tomorrow would bring decisions and challenges, but tonight, I allowed myself to simply be present in this moment of transition, no longer defined by what I'd lost, but by what I was creating. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the kitchen windows and the aroma of coffee brewing. Ethan, I realized, already up and moving around the house as if he'd never left. I found him at the dining table, laptop open, surrounded by printouts. "Hope you don't mind," he said by way of greeting. I couldn't sleep, so I started researching sustainable packaging options for heritage provisions. The current glass jars are great quality, but the shipping weight increases carbon footprint and costs. I found these alternatives that maintain shelf stability while reducing environmental impact. He pushed a folder toward me, enthusiasm radiating from him. The detailed analysis inside, complete with cost comparisons, supplier information, and sustainability metrics, stunned me. This wasn't a perfunctory gesture. Ethan had spent hours on this research. "This is impressive," I managed, flipping through the pages. "Are you sure you're the same kid who couldn't remember to take out the trash?" He laughed, the sound warming the kitchen. "Turns out I'm motivated when the work matters. Speaking of which, I hope you don't mind, but I scheduled us a meeting with a friend of mine from school. She's a whiz at social media marketing and happened to be visiting Portland this week. I thought she might have ideas for promoting the co-op launch." As we discussed possibilities over breakfast, I felt a shift in our relationship, from mother and son to something approaching colleagues, partners in a shared venture. Ethan's business education brought fresh perspectives I hadn't considered, while my culinary expertise and life experience provided the foundation for his theoretical knowledge. After breakfast, I called Marcus to discuss Thomas Rivera's interest. His enthusiasm was contagious. This could be the catalyst Heritage Provisions needs, Marcus explained. Rivera doesn't just bring capital, he brings connections, distribution channels, mentorship. He only backs businesses he believes can scale nationally while maintaining artisanal quality. That balance is exactly what I'm worried about, I admitted. I don't want to compromise what makes Heritage Provisions special just to grow faster. Rivera understands that, Marcus assured me. His most successful investments are companies that maintained their core identity while expanding. He's in town next week. Let me arrange a meeting. No commitment, just a conversation. After we hung up, I found Ethan in the garden, harvesting lavender for the day's production run. I joined him, secateurs in hand, as I explained Rivera's interest and my reservations. It's a classic entrepreneurial dilemma. He nodded, surprisingly knowledgeable. We just studied this in my business development course. The trick is finding investors whose values align with yours. We? I repeated, catching his choice of pronoun. Ethan looked briefly embarrassed, then squared his shoulders. Yeah, we, if you'll have me, that is. I've been thinking, what if my summer help wasn't just temporary? What if I came on board more permanently after graduation next year? I could handle the business side while you focus on product development and culinary direction. The proposal caught me completely off guard. You'd want to join Heritage Provisions full-time? What happened to your own dreams? This is my dream, he said simply. Working with sustainable food systems, building something meaningful. The fact that it's with you, continuing Grandma's legacy, that just makes it better. As we walked back to the house, arms full of fragrant lavender, I saw Heritage Provisions through new eyes, not just as my personal redemption or second act, but as a family legacy evolving into the future. Ethan's unexpected interest transformed the narrative from one of post-divorce reinvention to multi-generational continuity. For the first time since I'd discovered David's betrayal, I felt genuine gratitude for the path it had set me on. Without that painful catalyst, I might never have found the courage to start Heritage Provisions. Without the business, Ethan and I might never have discovered this new dimension to our relationship, one based on mutual respect and shared passion rather than traditional family roles. I stopped at the garden gate, turning to face my son in the morning light. Let's talk to Rivera together, I decided. See what he has to offer. But no matter what, Heritage Provisions stays true to its roots: quality ingredients, small batch production, recipes that tell our family story. Ethan grinned, sudden boyishness breaking through his new professional demeanor. Deal. Now let's make some jam that'll knock the co-op's customers' socks off. As we entered the kitchen, I felt the presence of generations of women who had created and preserved before me. My grandmother, my mother, now me, and perhaps someday, Ethan's children. The circle continuing, expanding, evolving. I tied on my apron and began sorting the lavender, a sense of rightness settling over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, negotiations with Rivera, decisions about Grace's offer, the continuing emotional aftermath of my marriage's end, I would face them from a position of strength and authenticity. The path forward was becoming clearer with each passing day. Not easier necessarily, just more unmistakably mine. The morning of the meeting with Thomas Rivera dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows as I prepared a special breakfast for Ethan and myself. My hands moved with practiced precision, whisking eggs for a soufflé, omelette with fresh herbs from the garden. Cooking had always been my refuge, the place where anxiety melted away and certainty took hold. Something smells amazing, Ethan commented, wandering into the kitchen still bleary-eyed from sleep. He'd stayed up late perfecting our presentation for Rivera, insisting that we needed concrete growth projections and market analysis to complement my product vision. Herb soufflé omelette, I replied, sliding the delicate creation onto plates. My culinary school specialty, Seemed appropriate for a day when we're trying to impress someone. Ethan accepted his portion with appreciative sniff. If the food doesn't convince Rivera to invest, nothing will. We ate in companionable silence, both of us mentally preparing for the meeting ahead. The house had sold the previous week, faster than expected and above asking price, which meant we had just 30 days to find new living arrangements. The clock was ticking on multiple fronts. "I've been thinking," Ethan said suddenly, setting down his fork. "Whatever happens with Rivera today, we should consider relocating production to a larger facility. The Victorian is charming, but limiting. If we're serious about scaling up, we need more space." I nodded, impressed again by his business acumen. "I've had the same thought. There's an industrial kitchen on the east side that's available for lease. Used to be a commercial bakery, before they expanded to a larger location. Marcus mentioned it last week." "We should look at it," Ethan agreed. "Today, after the Rivera meeting." The ease with which we'd fallen into this collaborative rhythm still surprised me. In just 2 weeks, Ethan had immersed himself completely in heritage provisions, bringing fresh ideas and energy while respecting the core values that made the company special. His enthusiasm was infectious, reigniting my own passion whenever doubts crept in. We arrived at Marcus's office 15 minutes early, carrying a carefully curated selection of Heritage Provisions products arranged in a handcrafted wooden gift box. Ethan's idea. "First impressions matter," he'd insisted. "We're not just selling preserves. We're selling an experience, a connection to tradition with a modern twist." Marcus greeted us warmly, taking the gift box with an appreciative nod. "Perfect touch," he murmured, before ushering us into his spacious corner office with its panoramic view of the Portland skyline. Thomas Rivera wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined someone older, more corporate. Pinstripe suit, power tie, commanding. Presence. Instead, the man who rose to greet us was perhaps in his early 50s, casually dressed in dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "Eleanor Morgan," he smiled, extending his hand. "I've heard wonderful things about you and Heritage Provisions. And this must be Ethan. Marcus mentioned you've joined the family business." I expected Ethan to correct him, to explain that his involvement was temporary, but instead he nodded confidently. "That's right. I'm handling business development and operations while my mother leads product creation and culinary direction." The easy way he claimed his role in the company caught me by surprise. Despite our conversations about his potential future involvement, hearing him presented as established fact to a potential investor made it suddenly, concretely real. "Perfect combination," Rivera nodded approvingly. "The most successful food ventures I've backed have had that balance. Someone who lives and breathes the culinary side partnered with someone who understands the business mechanics." "Please, sit." For the next hour, we presented Heritage Provisions, its origin, current status, and future vision. I spoke passionately about our commitment to quality, the stories behind our recipes, and the connection to local farmers and suppliers. Ethan seamlessly picked up with market analysis, growth projections, and expansion strategy. Marcus occasionally interjected with contextual information about the regional specialty food landscape. Rivera listened attentively, asking insightful questions that indicated genuine interest rather than merely going through the motions. When we finished our formal presentation, he leaned back in his chair, expression thoughtful. "I taste a lot of specialty food products," he began. "Hundreds each year, from passionate entrepreneurs convinced they've created something special. Most are good, some are very good. Rarely do I encounter something genuinely exceptional." He gestured to the empty jar of blackberry lavender honey, preserve on his desk. "This falls into that last category." My heart quickened at the praise, but I maintained a professional demeanor, waiting for him to continue. "Beyond the product quality, What interests me about Heritage Provisions is the story, not just the family recipes passed down through generations, but your personal journey, Eleanor. The courage to reinvent yourself, to build something authentic in midlife. That narrative will resonate strongly with consumers. My mother's story is certainly compelling, Ethan agreed. But we're careful not to define Heritage Provisions solely through that lens. The products stand on their own merits. Rivera nodded approvingly. Exactly right. The story gets customers to try the product once. The quality brings them back, again and again. He paused, reaching for a folder on the desk. Here's what I'm prepared to offer. $250,000 investment for a 20% equity stake in Heritage Provisions. The figure hung in the air between us, far larger than I had anticipated. Marcus had prepared us to expect perhaps $100,000 if Rivera was genuinely interested. That's a substantial offer, I said carefully. May I ask what your involvement would look like beyond the financial investment? Advisory role only, Rivera assured me. Quarterly board meetings, access to my network of retailers and distributors, mentorship is needed. I don't interfere with day-to-day operations or creative decisions. My philosophy is simple. I invest in people who know their business better than I do. And the growth expectations? Ethan asked, the question I'd been too overwhelmed to formulate. Realistic ones, Rivera replied. I understand that artisanal quality requires appropriate scaling. I'm not looking for explosive growth that compromises what makes Heritage Provisions special. I envision regional expansion over the next 2 years, with potential for national distribution through select specialty retailers by year 3. As he outlined his vision, I found myself nodding along. His approach aligned remarkably well with our own goals, ambitious but not reckless, respectful of the artisanal nature of the products. We'd need to discuss this privately, I said when he finished. Of course, Rivera smiled. Take whatever time you need. The offer stands for 2 weeks. He handed me his business card. Simple, elegant, no flashy title. Call me directly with any questions. And Eleanor, he added, his expression sincere, regardless of your decision, you've created something remarkable here. Don't lose sight of that. After Rivera departed, Marcus couldn't contain his excitement. This is unprecedented, he exclaimed. Rivera rarely makes offers at first meetings, and never at this valuation for such an early-stage company. He must really believe in Heritage Provisions. The validation was sweet, particularly after David's dismissal of my hobby business. Yet, as we drove to view the industrial kitchen space later that afternoon, a nagging uncertainty lingered beneath my excitement. You're quiet, Ethan observed as we navigated through East Portland's industrial district. Having second thoughts about Rivera's offer? Not second thoughts exactly, I replied, struggling to articulate my hesitation. More like trying to ensure I'm making decisions for the right reasons. This whole journey started because I needed to prove something, to myself, to your father. I don't want to make choices now based on continuing that pattern. Ethan considered this thoughtfully. What would be the right reasons then? Building something sustainable, I said, after a moment. Creating a company that honors tradition while evolving with the times. Producing food that brings genuine pleasure to people's lives. For what it's worth, Ethan said quietly, I think you've already proven everything you needed to. Whether we take Rivera's investment or not, Heritage Provisions is real. It's viable. It's yours. His words settled something in me, a restlessness I hadn't fully acknowledged. By the time we arrived at the industrial kitchen, a spacious, well-designed facility with ample room for expansion, I felt centered again, ready to evaluate our options with clear eyes. The kitchen tour confirmed what we'd suspected. This space would allow Heritage Provisions to grow significantly while maintaining artisanal production methods. With proper equipment upgrades, We could triple our output without compromising quality. The location even included a small storefront area that could serve as a tasting room and retail space. "What do you think?" I asked Ethan as we walked. The perimeter, mentally arranging equipment and workflow patterns. "It's perfect," he replied without hesitation. "Functional, accessible, room to grow. With Rivera's investment, we could secure a 3-year lease and still have capital for equipment upgrades and inventory expansion." We were discussing renovations with the leasing agent when my phone rang, Grace's name flashing on the screen. I stepped outside to take the call, expecting our usual check-in about dinner plans. "Have you seen it?" Grace demanded without preamble, her voice tight with urgency. "Seen what?" I asked, confused by her tone. "The article in PDX Eats, about David and Sophia." My stomach dropped. "No, what article?" Grace hesitated. "It's complicated. Can you meet me at my place in an hour? You need to see this in person." The drive to Grace's loft was a blur, my mind racing with possibilities. What could David and Sophia possibly be doing that warranted an urgent in-person discussion? The divorce was proceeding amicably enough, both of us seemingly ready to move on with our separate lives. Grace met me at the door, tablet in hand, expression grim. "Before you read this, remember that you're building something amazing with Heritage Provisions. Nothing can take that away from you." Her preamble only heightened my anxiety. I took the tablet with trembling hands and began reading the article displayed on screen. Portland's newest culinary power couple launches luxury preserve line. The accompanying photo showed David and Sophia standing proudly in a sleek industrial kitchen, surrounded by elegantly packaged jars. The headline alone felt like a physical blow, but the article's contents delivered the true devastation. Financial advisor David Morgan and chef Sophia Winters have announced the launch of Winters & Morgan Fine Foods, a luxury preserve and specialty food line that promises to elevate everyday moments through exceptional flavor experiences. Their inaugural collection features innovative flavor combinations like champagne poached pear with saffron and black truffle wild mushroom spread. "We're bringing a sophisticated contemporary approach to the preserves market," explains Winters, who trained at the renowned Le Cordon Bleu Paris before returning to Portland. "Our products are designed for the discerning palate, complex flavors crafted with premium ingredients." Morgan, who handles the business side of the venture, describes it as the natural evolution of a lifelong passion for fine food. The couple plans to distribute exclusively through high-end specialty retailers, with online direct-to-consumer sales launching next month. I couldn't read further. The room seemed to tilt around me as the full impact registered. David, my David, who had dismissed my preserve business as a hobby, who had never shown the slightest interest in specialty foods, was now launching his own competing company with Sophia. "They stole my idea," I whispered, shock giving way to a red-hot anger unlike anything I'd experienced before. My grandmother's recipe book disappears and suddenly they're preserve experts? This is why Sophia vandalized my shop. She wasn't just being vindictive. She was conducting industrial espionage. Grace sat beside me, her expression murderous. The recipe book that mysteriously reappeared in a dumpster, after they'd had plenty of time to copy everything. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. My hands shook with rage as I scrolled through the rest of the article, which detailed Winters and Morgan's unique approach and artisanal techniques, descriptions that could have been lifted directly from my own business plan. The timing can't be coincidental, I said, my voice unnaturally calm despite the storm raging inside. They waited until Heritage Provisions gained traction, then launched their knockoff with fancy packaging and inflated prices. They're positioning themselves as the premium alternative to my quaint family recipes. Grace took the tablet gently from my hands. "What are you going to do?" It was the same question she'd asked months ago when I'd discovered David's affair. Only now, the betrayal cut deeper. This wasn't just my husband cheating. This was someone stealing my heritage, my family legacy, my future livelihood. I'm going to fight, I said, standing abruptly. But first, I need to talk to Ethan. And a lawyer. I called Ethan on the drive home, asking him to meet me at the house. When I arrived, he was already waiting on the porch, concern evident in his expression. "What's happened?" he asked as I approached. "You sounded upset on the phone." Wordlessly, I handed him my phone with the article displayed. I watched his face as he read. Shock, disbelief, and finally, a cold anger mirroring my own. "That son of a—" he began, before catching himself. "Sorry, but this is— I can't believe he would do this to you, to us." The us wasn't lost on me. In Ethan's mind, Heritage Provisions had already become our shared venture, our joint future. "It gets worse," I said, unlocking the front door. "I think they stole Grandma's recipes. The book that went missing after the break-in? I'll bet anything Sophia took it, copied everything, then dumped it where it would eventually be found." Ethan's expression darkened further. "If they're using your recipes, that's intellectual property theft. We need to talk to a lawyer." "Already on it," I confirmed, reaching for my laptop. I called Marcus from the car. He's connecting us with an intellectual property attorney tomorrow morning. As I opened my email to confirm the appointment, a new message arrived from an unfamiliar address, David. Morgan, Winters, and Morgan. Come. The sight of it, so official, so calculated, sent a fresh wave of anger through me. "He's emailing you from their company account?" Ethan said incredulously, reading over my shoulder. "That's some nerve." I clicked, opened the message, bracing myself for whatever justification or explanation David might offer. "Ellie, by now you've probably seen the announcement about Winters and Morgan. I wanted you to hear from me directly that this venture represents a new chapter in my life, one I'm pursuing with passion and commitment. While I understand you might perceive some similarities between our businesses, I assure you that Sophia's recipes are entirely original creations based on her professional culinary training. Any resemblance to Heritage Provisions products is coincidental and reflects market demand for certain flavor profiles. I hope we can maintain the cordial relationship we've established during our divorce proceedings, and perhaps even find ways for our respective businesses to coexist peacefully in the marketplace. Regards, David Morgan, co-founder and CEO, Winters and Morgan Fine Foods." The cool detachment of his message, the corporate signature, the audacity of suggesting our businesses might coexist peacefully, it all fueled a determination I hadn't known I possessed. "He's gaslighting you," Ethan said, disgust evident in his voice. "Trying to make you doubt yourself, question whether they actually stole anything." "Classic David," I nodded. "He's building plausible deniability. If we pursue legal action, he'll claim Sophia developed everything independently through her culinary training." "Can we prove otherwise?" Ethan asked. "Without the original recipe book, it might be difficult to establish that their products are based on Grandma's recipes." I considered this, trying to think like the businessman David had always been. "We might not need to prove they stole specific recipes. The timing alone is suspicious. David had no interest in specialty foods until he saw Heritage Provisions gaining traction. And Sophia's break-in at the shop is documented with the police. Plus, there's the social media evidence," Ethan added. "The selfie she posted outside your shop the night of the vandalism." A plan began forming in my mind, not just a defensive strategy to protect Heritage Provisions, but a comprehensive approach to outmaneuver Winters and Morgan in the marketplace. "We need to move quickly," I said, pulling out a notebook. "Here's what we're going to do." For the next 3 hours, Ethan and I developed our response strategy, fueled by a shared determination to protect what we'd built. By midnight, we had a comprehensive plan addressing immediate legal concerns, brand positioning, market differentiation, and accelerated growth. One question remains, Ethan said as we reviewed our action items. Do we still take Rivera's investment? I'd been wrestling with this very question since seeing the article. On one hand, Rivera's capital would allow us to implement our response strategy more aggressively. On the other hand, accepting external investment meant accountability to someone beyond ourselves, potentially limiting our flexibility during this crucial period. I think we do, I decided after careful consideration. But with one condition, we negotiate for a smaller investment amount with the same equity percentage. Instead of $250,000 for 20%, we ask for $150,000. That gives us enough capital for immediate needs without overcapitalizing. Ethan nodded slowly. Smart. It shows Rivera we're confident in our ability to grow efficiently while still securing the partnership benefits beyond just money. His network, his mentorship, his credibility in the specialty food world. The next morning, we met with Jennifer Liang, the intellectual property attorney Marcus had recommended. She reviewed everything: the article, Sophia's deleted social media post, the timing of events, David's email, with methodical precision. Here's where we stand legally, she explained after her review. Without direct evidence that they copied your specific recipes, proving intellectual property theft will be challenging. However, the documented break-in at your shop, combined with the suspicious timing of their launch, gives us leverage for a cease and desist letter that may slow them down. What about trademark protection? I asked. Heritage Provisions is registered, but we haven't trademarked individual product names or flavor descriptions. Jennifer nodded. That should be our first priority, securing comprehensive trademark protection for your existing products and anticipated future lines. That won't stop them from making similar preserves, but it will prevent them from using your specific branding language or product names. And beyond legal action? Ethan pressed. What's our best strategy for marketplace differentiation? That's where public relations comes in, Jennifer smiled. I've taken the liberty of inviting my colleague James Chen to join us. He specializes in crisis management and competitive PR for food businesses. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door and a sharply dressed man in his 40s entered with an energetic stride. James Chen, he introduced himself with a firm handshake. I've reviewed your situation, and I believe we have a significant opportunity here, not just to defend against this competitive threat, but to leverage it for Heritage Provisions' benefit. For the next hour, James outlined a comprehensive PR strategy that positioned Heritage Provisions as the authentic, genuine article against what he termed corporate imitations. His approach was subtle yet devastating, never directly attacking Winters and Morgan, but consistently reinforcing Heritage Provisions' authenticity, family legacy, and artisanal integrity. The story is your greatest asset, James emphasized. Eleanor Morgan, rediscovering family recipes, building something meaningful after personal setbacks, joined by her son to continue a multi-generational legacy. That narrative resonates powerfully with consumers seeking authenticity in an increasingly corporate food landscape. By the time we left Jennifer's office, armed with a clear legal and PR strategy, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. What David and Sophia had intended as a devastating blow had instead crystallized my vision for Heritage Provisions and strengthened my resolve. First step, I told Ethan as we headed toward our next appointment, is securing that industrial kitchen. With or without Rivera's investment, we need to scale up production immediately. Agreed, he nodded. And I think we should accelerate the retail space development too. Creating a direct connection with customers will be crucial for building the brand loyalty James talked about. Our next stop was the Portland Food Co-op, where our first major wholesale order was being prominently displayed in the fall harvest showcase. Donna Wright greeted us warmly, leading us to an eye-catching end cap feature where Heritage Provisions preserves were artfully arranged among autumn decorations. "They're flying off the shelves," she reported happily. "We've sold nearly half the initial order in just 3 days. Customers love the story. We included those lovely biography cards you provided with your grandmother's photo." The sight of our products so beautifully presented, clearly resonating with customers, provided a much-needed emotional boost after the shock of David's betrayal. As we discussed reorder timelines with Donna, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Rivera wants to meet again tomorrow. Says he's seen the Winters and Morgan announcement and has thoughts to share." I showed the message to Ethan, who raised an eyebrow. "Could go either way," he mused. "He might see the competition as a risk factor, or he might recognize the opportunity to back the authentic player in an expanding market." "Only one way to find out," I replied, texting Marcus to confirm the meeting. That evening, I found myself alone in the kitchen of what would soon be someone else's home. Ethan had gone out with friends, promising to return with dinner, leaving me with my thoughts and the familiar comfort of my cooking space. Almost without conscious decision, I began gathering ingredients for preserves, not a Heritage Provisions recipe, but something new, something that represented the next chapter. As I chopped, measured, and stirred, I reflected on the whirlwind of the past months. From the devastating discovery of David's affair to the launch of Heritage Provisions, from Ethan's unexpected partnership to this latest challenge from Winters and Morgan, each apparent setback had ultimately propelled me forward, forcing growth and change I might otherwise have avoided. The preserve simmered on the stove, a bold combination of blood orange, cardamom, and vanilla bean that filled the kitchen with an intoxicating aroma. As I watched it thicken to the perfect consistency, I realized this recipe represented my evolution, taking traditional techniques and familiar ingredients, then transforming them into something unexpectedly complex and satisfying. Just as I was ladling the finished preserve into sterilized jars, the doorbell rang. Curious, Ethan had a key and we weren't expecting visitors, I wiped my hands and went to answer. Sophia Winters stood on my porch, looking significantly less polished than in her PR photos. Her eyes were slightly red-rimmed, her posture tense rather than confident. "Can we talk?" she asked without preamble. "It's important." My first instinct was to slam the door in her face. This woman had broken into my shop, stolen my recipe book, vandalized my property, and now had the audacity to appear at my home? But curiosity overrode anger, and I stepped back to allow her inside. 5 minutes, I said coldly. "That's all you get." Sophia entered cautiously, glancing around as if expecting an ambush. When she spoke, her voice lacked the smoothness I'd anticipated, instead sounding strained and hesitant. "I know what you must think of me," she began, remaining standing even when I gestured toward the living room seating. "The other woman, the thief, the vandal. You forgot corporate copycat," I added dryly. "Though I suppose that's David's role in your little partnership." She flinched visibly at his name. "That's actually why I'm here. David isn't. He isn't who you think he is. Or maybe he's exactly who you think he is, just worse." My patience thinned. "If you came to badmouth my ex-husband, you're wasting both our time. I'm well aware of David's shortcomings." "No," Sophia shook her head emphatically. "You don't understand. Winters and Morgan wasn't my idea. It was David's, from the beginning. He saw what you were building with Heritage Provisions, saw the potential, and decided to appropriate it, but with a luxury positioning." I studied her face, searching for signs of deception. "Why should I believe anything you say? You broke into my shop, stole my family's recipe book." "Yes," she admitted, surprising me with her directness. "I did. David convinced me it was justified, said you'd taken family money to fund your hobby, that recovering the recipes was just evening the score." She reached into her bag and withdrew a manila envelope. "But this is beyond what I signed up for." She handed me the envelope. Inside were internal Winters and Morgan documents, marketing plans, product development schedules, financial projections. As I scanned them, my blood ran cold. David's strategy was more calculated than I'd imagined, a systematic plan to position Winters and Morgan as the premium alternative to heritage provisions, leveraging my initial market development while targeting higher-end retailers with essentially the same products at triple the price point. Most damning was a slide titled Competitive Elimination Strategy, which outlined a three-phase approach to forcing heritage provisions out of business through targeted price undercuts at key retailers, followed by acquisition offers when financial pressure peaks. "He's planning to put me out of business, then buy my company for pennies on the dollar," I said, the realization like ice in my veins. Sophia nodded miserably. "That's the endgame. Use me for culinary credibility. Use your recipes as the foundation. Then eliminate you as competition before ultimately absorbing whatever brand equity you've built." "Why are you showing me this?" I demanded, suspicion overtaking shock. "Why betray your business partner?" She laughed bitterly. "Partner? I'm an employee, Eleanor, a glorified recipe tester with a fancy title and a 1% equity stake. I thought we were building something together, personally and professionally. Then I found these documents, along with plans to replace me with a more prominent chef once the brand is established." The revelation of David's duplicity, even toward his affair partner, shouldn't have surprised me. Yet somehow this new depth of calculation still had the power to shock. "So what now?" I asked. "You've warned me. What do you expect in return?" "Nothing," Sophia said quietly. "Consider it partial atonement for my role in all this. Use the information however you see fit." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, your preserves, the ones I tried from your recipe book before returning it, they're extraordinary. Better than anything I created for Winters and Morgan, even with my training. There's something in them that can't be taught in culinary school. Something authentic." After she left, I stood frozen in the entryway, the envelope of documents, heavy in my hands. When Ethan returned 20 minutes later with takeout, he found me still there, processing the encounter. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked, setting down the food bags. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," I replied, handing him the envelope. "Just the truth, in all its calculating glory." As Ethan reviewed the documents, his expression hardened. "This changes everything," he said finally. "With these internal documents proving their intentional strategy to copy heritage provisions and eliminate competition, we have what we need for legal action." I nodded slowly, a plan forming. "Yes, but I think there's an even better approach than immediate litigation. One that turns David's own strategy against him." "I'm listening," Ethan said, his eyes bright with the same strategic intelligence that had served us so well in building heritage provisions. "First," I began, "we meet with Rivera tomorrow and accept his investment offer. The full amount, not the reduced figure we discussed. We'll need the capital for what comes next." "Which is?" A smile spread across my face. Not the warm, gentle expression I'd worn for years as David's wife, but something sharper, more determined. "We're going to beat them at their own game, and I know exactly how to do it." That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with the comprehensive strategy taking shape. By dawn, I had outlined a multi-pronged approach that would not only protect heritage provisions from David's predatory tactics, but position us for the kind of growth I'd barely dared to imagine before. As sunrise painted the kitchen in golden light, I stood at the counter, adding the final touches to a presentation for Rivera. The documents Sophia had provided were arranged neatly in a folder beside my laptop, physical evidence of the threat we faced and the opportunity it represented. Ethan appeared in the doorway, already dressed for our meeting. "Ready for this?" he asked, pouring himself coffee from the pot I'd brewed an hour earlier. I nodded, a calm certainty settling over me. More than ready. It's time to show David and the world what Heritage Provisions is truly capable of. As we gathered our materials and headed for the car, I paused for one last look at the house that had been the backdrop to so much of my life. My marriage, motherhood, years of suppressed ambitions, and finally, the awakening that had led to Heritage Provisions. Goodbye, I whispered, not to the physical structure, but to the woman I'd been within those walls, compliant, diminished, defined by others' expectations. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had discovered that the greatest revenge against betrayal wasn't anger or retribution, but success on her own terms. Part 5. The Transformation and New Chapter. Thomas Rivera leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin as he studied the documents spread across the conference table. The morning light streaming through Marcus's office windows cast a warm glow over the damning evidence of David's predatory business strategy. For several minutes, Rivera said nothing, methodically reviewing each page with the practiced eye of a seasoned investor. "Well," he finally said, looking up at me with newfound respect, "this certainly changes the competitive landscape analysis. David Morgan clearly underestimated you, Eleanor." I felt Ethan shift beside me, tense with anticipation. We'd presented everything to Rivera: the Winters and Morgan announcement, Sophia's visit, the internal documents revealing David's true intentions, and most importantly, our comprehensive counter-strategy. "The question," I replied evenly, "is whether this new information affects your interest in Heritage Provisions." Rivera smiled, the expression warming his usually reserved features. "On the contrary, I find myself even more convinced of my initial assessment. You've demonstrated something rare in business: resilience in the face of unexpected challenges. That quality, more than any market projection or product innovation, predicts long-term success." He gathered the documents into a neat pile, then reached for his briefcase. "My offer stands, $250,000 for 20%. But I'd like to add something." He produced a sleek folder embossed with his company's logo. "Access to my legal team for handling the Winters and Morgan situation, plus expedited introductions to key national retailers in my network. The sooner we get Heritage Provisions established in premium markets, the stronger your position against competitors." Ethan and I exchanged a quick glance of mutual agreement before I extended my hand across the table. "We accept. Thank you for your confidence in us." As we signed the preliminary investment agreement, a weight lifted from my shoulders. Not just financial pressure, but the deeper burden of doubt I'd carried since starting this journey. Rivera's investment validated what I'd begun to believe about myself: that I was capable of building something significant, something lasting. "I have one question," Rivera said as we concluded the meeting. "Your counter-strategy for Winters and Morgan, launching a premium sub-brand alongside your core Heritage Provisions line, it's brilliant market positioning. But the timeline seems ambitious. Can you realistically develop and launch a new product line within 6 weeks?" I smiled, thinking of the blood orange, cardamom, and vanilla preserve cooling in my kitchen at home. "The development is already underway. Heritage Reserve will feature sophisticated flavor combinations that honor traditional techniques while appealing to modern palates. We're not rushing to market. We're accelerating a planned expansion." Rivera nodded appreciatively. "That's exactly the distinction that matters. I look forward to tasting the results." As we left Marcus's office, investment agreement in hand, Ethan couldn't contain his excitement. "We did it, Mom. Rivera's backing, legal support, retail connections. We have everything we need to execute the plan." I embraced my son, overwhelmed by how far we'd come together. We did. Now the real work begins. The following weeks passed in a blur of focused activity. With Rivera's investment secured, We signed the lease on the industrial kitchen space, ordered additional equipment, and hired our first 2 employees, a production assistant and a part-time administrative coordinator. Ethan took charge of operations, implementing systems and workflows that maximized efficiency without compromising quality. Jennifer Liang, our intellectual property attorney, filed comprehensive trademark protections for both Heritage Provisions and our new premium line, Heritage Reserve. She also prepared cease and desist letters regarding specific recipes and production methods that mirrored my grandmother's too closely, ready to deploy if Winters and Morgan's products crossed certain legal boundaries. James Chen, our PR strategist, orchestrated a masterful campaign that subtly positioned Heritage Provisions as authentically artisanal since 1937, the year my grandmother began developing her preserve recipes. Without ever mentioning Winters and Morgan by name, the messaging emphasized multi-generational expertise and family tradition, in contrast to recent corporate entrance to the specialty preserves market. 32 days after our meeting with Aida Rivera, I stood in our new production facility, surveying the transformation. What had been an empty industrial space now hummed with purposeful activity. The commercial kitchen gleamed with state-of-the-art equipment beside carefully preserved vintage copper pots, a visual representation of our brand ethos, honoring tradition while embracing innovation. The front retail space, though still under construction, was taking shape as a warm, inviting tasting room where customers could sample products and learn about the family heritage behind them. Large framed photographs adorned the walls, my grandmother in her kitchen, my mother preserving, summer peaches, me as a young woman learning the techniques that would later become the foundation of Heritage Provisions. The contractor says the retail space will be ready for our grand opening next week, Ethan reported, clipboard in hand as he joined me. Just in time for the food critic from Northwest Table to visit. I nodded, mentally reviewing our launch timeline. And the first production run of Heritage Reserve? 12 varieties, 24 cases each, labels arriving tomorrow. We'll have everything ready for the distributor meeting on Thursday. I smiled at his efficiency. In just a few months, Ethan had evolved from enthusiastic helper to confident operations director, applying his business education to real-world challenges with remarkable aptitude. "Any word from your father?" I asked casually, though we both knew there was nothing casual about the question. Ethan's expression tightened. Nothing direct, but according to their social media, Winters and Morgan is hosting a launch party at Archer's next Tuesday, same night as our grand opening. Of course they are, I sighed, unsurprised by David's transparent attempt to overshadow our event. Well, we'll just have to make our opening impossible to ignore. Later that afternoon, I met Grace for coffee at her restaurant before the dinner service began. She'd been my emotional anchor throughout this whirlwind period, providing perspective when stress threatened to overwhelm me. "So, Heritage Reserve launches next week alongside the new retail space," she summarized, stirring her espresso. "Rivera's investment is finalized. The Portland Food Co-op has doubled their order. And Northwest Table is sending their notoriously picky food critic to your opening. Not bad for a woman whose husband claimed she couldn't run a business." I laughed at her succinct summary. "When you put it that way, it sounds almost easy." "There was nothing easy about it," Grace countered firmly. "You built something remarkable from scratch while navigating a divorce, a betrayal, and now direct competition from your ex. Most people would have crumbled under half that pressure." Her words warmed me, but I shook my head slightly. "I had help. You, Marcus, Ethan. I couldn't have done this alone." "That's not weakness, Ellie," Grace said gently. "That's wisdom. Knowing when to accept support, when to collaborate, when to delegate. David always operated like a solo act even within your marriage. You're building a community around Heritage Provisions, and that's why you'll succeed where he'll ultimately fail." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Dad just called. Wants to meet tomorrow. Says it's important. I showed the message to Grace, who raised a skeptical eyebrow. Interesting timing. What do you think he wants? Only one way to find out, I replied, texting Ethan back. Tell him noon at Riverfront Park. Public place, limited time. The following day dawned crisp and clear, autumn painting the park in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. I arrived early, selecting a bench with a view of the Willamette River. The water flowed steadily past, a reminder that movement forward was the natural order of things. David appeared precisely at noon, dressed in the impeccable business attire that had once seemed so impressive to me. Now, I noticed the artifice, the carefully selected designer watch, the expensive haircut, the practiced confidence in his stride. All external markers of success without the substance beneath. Eleanor, he greeted me formally, taking a seat beside me on the bench. Thank you for meeting me. What do you want, David? I asked directly, seeing no reason for pleasantries. He sighed, gazing out at the river rather than meeting my eyes. I've been monitoring Heritage Provisions' development. You've made remarkable progress. The Rivera investment was particularly impressive. Is that why you wanted to meet? To complement my business acumen after spending years dismissing it? David winced slightly at my tone. Partially, but also to propose a solution that could benefit us both. He turned to face me, expression serious. I want to discuss a merger between Winters and Morgan and Heritage Provisions. I stared at him, momentarily speechless, before a startled laugh escaped me. A merger? You can't be serious. I'm completely serious, he insisted. Think about it logically, Eleanor. We're competing for the same market share. You have authentic family recipes and a compelling origin story. We have Sophia's culinary training and connections to luxury retailers. Together, we could dominate the specialty preserves category nationally. The audacity was breathtaking. After stealing my recipes, planning to drive me out of business, and scheduling his launch party specifically to overshadow my grand opening, he now proposed we join forces, as if his betrayal could be erased by a business arrangement. David, I said carefully, I want to be absolutely clear. There will never, under any circumstances, be a merger between our companies. Heritage Provisions and Winters and Morgan will remain competitors, nothing more. His expression hardened. That's an emotional response, not a business decision. Competition between us will drive down prices, split the market, and ultimately, harm both companies. Perhaps, I conceded, but I'd rather compete fairly than partner with someone who's already demonstrated such dishonesty. I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. If that's all you wanted to discuss, I have a business to run. David rose as well, his composure slipping just enough to reveal frustration beneath. This isn't over, Eleanor. Winters and Morgan launches officially next week. Once retailers and consumers experience our products, you'll understand the market reality. My offer won't remain open indefinitely. I smiled, genuinely amused by his transparent attempt at intimidation. Goodbye, David. I wish you all the success you truly deserve. As I walked away, I felt a final thread snap, the last remaining connection to the woman I'd been during our marriage. That Eleanor might have considered his proposal, might have doubted her ability to succeed without his involvement. But that version of me was gone, replaced by someone who recognized David's offer for what it was. A last-ditch attempt to control what he could no longer suppress. The grand opening of Heritage Provisions retail space coincided with perfect autumn weather, crisp air and golden sunlight that made the Victorian building's restored facade glow with welcoming warmth. We'd decided on a soft opening approach for the first few hours, invitation only for local food writers, specialty retailers, and loyal customers from the farmers' market days, followed by a public reception in the evening. Ethan greeted guests at the door while I conducted tours of the production facility, explaining our artisanal methods and commitment to local sourcing. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with particular excitement about the Heritage Reserve line, my premium. Preserves featuring complex, unexpected flavor combinations. The blood orange cardamom is extraordinary, declared Lucia Chen, the notoriously critical food writer from Northwest Table. There's a balance here that's difficult to achieve. The warmth of cardamom playing against the bright citrus, with vanilla adding depth without sweetness. Genuinely sophisticated. As the evening public reception began, the space filled with community members curious about the new business. I mingled among them, sharing samples and stories, watching with quiet satisfaction as people connected with the products and the heritage behind them. "Mom?" Ethan approached, phone in hand. "You need to see this." He showed me an Instagram post from a local food influencer, a side-by-side comparison of Heritage Reserve's Blood Orange Cardamom Vanilla Bean Preserve and Winters & Morgan's Blood Orange Preserve with Cardamom and Madagascar Vanilla. The caption read, "Interesting timing. Two nearly identical products launching the same week from competing Portland preserve makers. Blind taste test coming soon. Preservewares. PDX Food." I studied the image, noting the similarities in color and texture, though Winters & Morgan's packaging featured more elaborate design elements and premium cues. They rushed something similar into production, I realized. They must have heard about Heritage Reserve through industry channels and scrambled to create a competing product. Ethan nodded grimly, attempting to undercut our launch momentum. Classic corporate tactic. But rushed development means compromised quality, I pointed out. I created that recipe over weeks of careful refinement. They've cobbled together an imitation in days. As if to confirm my assessment, a notification appeared on Ethan's phone. The same influencer posting an update. Blind taste test complete. While both preserves look similar, Heritage Provisions version has significantly more depth and complexity. The Winters & Morgan product is good, but lacks the perfect balance of its competitor. Heritage Provisions for the win. Preserve preference. Ethan grinned, showing me the post. The market will decide, just like you said. The evening continued successfully, with sales exceeding our projections and several specialty retailers requesting wholesale information. By closing time, we'd sold out of 3 varieties completely and had a list of customers requesting notification when more became available. As the last guests departed and we began cleaning up, Ethan asked the question that had been hovering all day. "Any news about the Winters & Morgan launch party?" I shook my head. Nothing specific. Grace mentioned, the attendance seemed sparse from what she heard through restaurant industry channels. But that's just hearsay. "Well, whatever happened there, we've had an unqualified success here," Ethan declared, gesturing around the space, now bearing the positive evidence of a busy, successful event. Later that night, as I settled into my new apartment, a bright, modern space overlooking the river, purchased with proceeds from the house sale, my phone chimed with a text from Grace. "Check your email. Just sent something interesting." I opened my laptop to find an email with a forwarded press release. The subject line made me sit up straight. Winters & Morgan announces restructuring and strategic pivot. The press release, dated that very evening, announced that Sophia Winters had acquired controlling interest in Winters & Morgan Fine Foods and would be repositioning the brand to focus exclusively on savory preserves and gourmet condiments, moving away from sweet preserves entirely. The carefully worded statement included a quote from Sophia. "This strategic pivot allows Winters & Morgan to focus on an underserved niche in the specialty foods market. Our culinary expertise is better applied to developing innovative savory products rather than competing in the established sweet preserves category where traditional family recipes reign supreme." Between the lines, I read the truth. David's attempt to compete directly with Heritage Provisions had failed before it truly began. Sophia, showing more business acumen than I'd given her credit for, had executed a strategic retreat from direct competition into an adjacent category where success might still be possible. I forwarded the press release to Ethan with a single comment. First battle won. His response came seconds later. But the war continues. Savory preserves are still part of our expansion plan for spring. I smiled at his competitive spirit. One success at a time, I texted back. Tonight, we celebrate. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of Heritage Provisions' expanded production facility, watching as employees filled, labeled, and packed preserves for shipment across the country. What had begun as a desperate act of self-preservation, after discovering David's betrayal, had evolved into a thriving business with 15 employees, distribution in specialty retailers in 23 states, and a Northwest Artisanal Food Award proudly displayed in our retail space. The journey hadn't been without challenges. Winters and Morgan continued to compete in adjacent categories, though David had been notably absent from recent press about the company, with Sophia increasingly positioned as the sole creative force. Our production schedule sometimes strained our capacity, especially as wholesale orders increased following the NAFA recognition. And balancing growth with artisanal quality required constant vigilance. But each challenge had been met with the same determination that had fueled Heritage Provisions from the beginning. Ethan had proven himself an exceptional operations director, implementing systems that maintained quality while increasing efficiency. Our new product development process, now a collaborative effort between myself and our assistant preserve maker, Lena, ensured continuous innovation while honoring traditional techniques. "Delivery for you, Ms. Morgan," called Amy, our office manager, approaching with a small package. "Just arrived by courier." I thanked her and opened the package to find a handwritten note from Thomas Rivera, accompanying a newspaper clipping from the Wall Street Journal's business section. The headline read, "Heritage Provisions leads artisanal preserve renaissance, expanding traditional category." Rivera's note was brief but meaningful. "Vision, resilience, authenticity. You exemplify all three. Proud to be part of your journey. TR." I pinned the article to our employee bulletin board, a reminder of how far we'd come and the principles that had guided our growth. As I turned to head back to my office, I caught sight of Ethan in the test kitchen, teaching a new employee the precise technique for testing preserves for the perfect set, the very method my grandmother had taught me decades ago. The sight filled me with a profound sense of continuity and purpose. What had begun as an act of defiance, taking half the savings and starting the business my husband had dismissed, had become something far more meaningful. A legacy stretching backward to my grandmother and forward to future generations. That evening, after production had ended for the day, I invited the entire team to gather in the retail space for an impromptu celebration. Standing before them, these people who had joined the Heritage Provisions family and contributed their talents to its success, I felt a swell of gratitude. 1 year ago today, I started this business at the lowest point in my life, I began, raising a glass of sparkling cider. What began as an act of survival has become something I never could have imagined. Not just a successful company, but a community of people who believe in creating something authentic and meaningful together. I looked around at their faces, Ethan, our production team, retail staff, administrative support, each person essential to what we'd built. Heritage Provisions isn't just about preserves, I continued. It's about preserving what matters. Traditions, quality, integrity, connections. Through all the challenges and victories of this past year, that purpose has remained constant. As glasses clinked and conversations flowed around me, I stepped outside briefly for a moment of quiet reflection. The evening air carried the first hint of spring, promising new beginnings and growth. From devastating betrayal had come unexpected renewal. Not just a business, but a reclamation of self, a discovery of strength I hadn't known I possessed. I thought of David briefly, wondering if he regretted his dismissal of my hobby business. now that Heritage Provisions had succeeded beyond even my own expectations. But the thought held no emotional charge, no lingering hurt or desire for vindication. His betrayal had been the catalyst for my transformation, but he no longer occupied space in my present or future. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Dinner at my place tomorrow? Have news about Seattle expansion. Also, Marcus bringing friend he thinks you should meet. Apparently quite the gourmet." I smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it. I'll bring the preserves." As I returned inside to rejoin the celebration, I caught my reflection in the window. Confident, purposeful, at peace. The woman who had once measured her worth through others' eyes now stood firmly in her own power, building a future entirely of her own design. The business I'd always dreamed of had become more than financial success or professional validation. It had become the vehicle through which I'd rediscovered myself, stronger, more resilient, and infinitely more capable than I'd ever imagined. And that, I realized, as I stepped back into the warm light of Heritage Provisions, surrounded by the community we'd built together, was the most valuable preservation of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.